This little manuscript here is called Hayklans Luck, and it's by Elizabeth Cochrane. Chapter 8, Uxbridge. A horse, my kingdom for a horse. The large Queen Anne house at Uxbridge appealed to Boris at once, not only because of its nicely proportioned windows and doors, which reminded him of his old home, but because beyond the large garden were fields. One in particular was very suitable for horses to graze in. 2 horses were purchased immediately, one to be entered into races and the other to ride. Both these aims were a little frustrated, as Boris found it not so easy to pay for racehorses and provide a handler for them, and the local hunt got somewhat peeved when he rode in front of the horses and set the fox free from them. They would have torn it to bits, he explained. It was worse than the white foxes in the traps in Russia. After a while, Leah chased him up to London to her uncle, who had the usual furrier's workshop. Boris, with the usual Hayklans luck, found the city of London more attractive than he had thought it would be. His charm and energy caused the business to become known for its interesting young manager. The only disturbing thing being that as it grew and developed into a large concern, he overpaid the workers and undercharged the customers, which deprived his uncle-in-law of some of the advantages of employing so popular a helper. Leah lived a busy life and happy in her large home. Besides chasing strushkins from under the beds and carpets, she produced a great many more children, entertained friends, relations, neighbours and anyone who happened to be passing. Her supper table was usually adorned by the local parson, the grocer's boy, the lady next door, and a few workers from the uncle's factory, and one of the school teachers from the primary school. This particular lady once remarked that Harry, one of the younger ones, was a demon. Leah was very pleased, as she understood the lady to mean a diamond. At first, her eldest son Michael was sent to private school. There was a lack of success about this, as the child could only speak French and hated tea so much that he spat it out all over the lunch table. The private school objected to this, and also to his long golden curls, which Leah refused to have cut. Therefore he was withdrawn and sent to the local primary school. Michael did not care for this school very much either, or perhaps the school did not care for him, and one morning, instead of going there, he set off with his younger brother Nate to walk to London. His idea was to visit his auntie Katie, who was renowned for her toffee making. He knew the direction, but had no idea how far it was. When the 2 boys reached Hammersmith Broadway, they were tired and confused. Michael told Nate to ask a policeman the way to London. The officer was very suspicious and began to ask pertinent questions. Ever resourceful, Michael grabbed his younger brother, saying, "He's always running away," and bolted. It seems incredible that they actually got to London, their aunt's home, footsore and weary, while most of the police force in London had been out looking for them. "These schools are useless," said their father. "A tutor must be engaged for the boys." This was done. Unfortunately, the young man was Russian and a violinist, with also, yes, some might have guessed, a passion for horses. He tried to teach the boys the violin, as he had few other accomplishments. Leah fixed him with one of her glassy looks and said, "I cannot have this squeaking in my house. Out!" She drove him into the garden, where the neighbours complained also. In despair, the tutor took the boys and violin in what he called nature walks. These eventually led to racetracks and point-to-point meetings, so that the only nature study the boys learned was about horses. In those days, currency was in golden sovereigns, and the boys were given far too many of them. Once at the racetrack, Michael won a great many more, but he didn't think that they looked enough, so he took them to the bank and had them changed into farthings. He had to fetch the garden wheelbarrow to get them home. where he stacked them in the kitchen drawers. They soon got out of those and strayed all over the house, under the carpets, down the drains, into the beds, and finally into the food. When Leah discovered some in the flour bin, she hit the ceiling and had them all collected and put into the dustbin. So ended Michael's first fortune. I do not believe he ever won anything again, although it is not for want of trying. His younger brother, Ray, on the other hand, was more conservative with his winnings. He was determined to actually save them up, knowing the tendency of his brothers to borrow his winnings to put on other horses. He decided to hide his sovereigns. Uxbridge was very rural in those days, and an old stone bridge was over the river. Ray removed a stone from this and hid his money under the arch. Alas, there was heavy rain, and when he came to look for his money, it had all been washed away. This determined him never to save up anything again. This he did to the despair of his wife and family in later years. Not only were the boys fond of racehorses, but they also liked the horses in their fields. One of these got so fond of the boys that it followed them indoors one day, and while they were having tea, it went upstairs, and being thirsty went into the narrow lavatory for a drink. The boys had forgotten about the horse and were stuffing themselves with bread and jam when their mother came in. Going upstairs to remove her hat and coat, she saw what looked like the rear of a horse in her lavatory. Having a closer look, she saw that it was indeed a horse. Rushing down into the kitchen, she commanded, "Get it out!" The boys tried, but of course the horse would not budge. It gazed pensively out of the window, so immovable as the Rock of Gibraltar. The smallest boy crawled under its legs and pushed while the others pulled. Eventually it was removed, accompanied by many dramatic remarks from Leah about scratching paintwork and dirty stairs and the pound of sugar lumps missing from the larder. On the whole, it seems a pity that the tutor was unable to teach the boys how to play the violin. The family history goes that these boys were a very, very, very naughty bunch and only got naughtier as the years went on. I haven't heard all the tales, but some of the tales I've heard would make your hair stand on end. Chapter 9. C'est la guerre. A moment while the trumpets blow, he sees his brood about their knee. The next, like fire, he meets the foe and strikes him dead for thine and thee. Money was still coming to Boris for his share of the Russian properties. His mother was dead, his sister married to a local landowner, and one of his brothers was a professor at St. Petersburg University, while the elder managed the estate. Boris always wished to return to his home, but was frustrated in his plans by the fact that Leah was producing such a large family. 3 little girls, Rose, Sally and Anne, and a string of little boys, Harry, Sonny, Jack, etc. Boris, apart from his city activities, was kept busy teaching them manners. They were never allowed to leave the table without saying thank you for a very nice meal, even if it was boring old borscht and blinnicks. Nor were they allowed parochial conversation. If they gabbled about themselves, about school or clothes, Boris would bang the table and say, "Come, come, general conversation at mealtimes, please, especially if there are visitors present." It seems a pity that these traditions have not been upheld among some of his descendants. When the 1914 war broke out, Boris joined Kitchener's famous first 100,000. No regard seemed to have been paid to his Russian nationality. Having held a commission in the Tsar's army, he was given one in the Welsh regiment. When this regiment was sent to the front, the adjutant, realising how many dependents young Hayklans had, posted him, to his great disappointment, to take charge of the regiment's stores and equipment in a remote Welsh village. Boris was disappointed, as he would have preferred, like fire, to meet the foe, but Hayklans Luck took care of that, and he settled down in the mountain village. He spent time in the local inn trying to learn Welsh, as little else was spoken there in those days. One day the innkeeper said to him, "They tell me there are Jews in the regiment." "Whatever? What are they like? Do they have horns?" "Look you," Boris laughed. "There are 3 in this bar already. You know them very well. Sam Cohen, Joe Freeman and me." "But," said the innkeeper, "they just look the same as Welshmen. Whatever?" After the retreat from Mons, nothing was heard from Boris's regiment. He waited and waited. No stores were called for, no directions given. After some time, a young soldier arrived on a motorcycle. The regiment had been wiped out. He told Boris, "Not a man jack of them left, not even the colonel." "What are we going to do then?" asked Boris. "I don't know what you're going to do," said the young man, "but I'm going to load up one of these lorries with food and drive it home." This he did. Boris was shocked, however. He thought he might as well take some leave himself, just to see how family fared, so taking some bars of chocolate for the children, he set off for Uxbridge. When he explained to Leah what had happened, she was very cross. "Why did you not bring us a lorry full of food?" she asked. "It would have seemed like robbing the dead," said Boris. "In fact, I should not have taken the chocolate." "Nonsense," said Leah, ever practical. "What do the dead want with chocolate? All they want is little white tombstones, and us to mourn for them." Boris waited and waited, but no word came from the army. So he hung up his uniform and helped the gardener to grow cabbages. So ended his career in the British Army, as farcically as that in the Russian Army. With the ending of the Great War came also the ending of the Tsarist regime in Russia. When the communists reorganised the whole country, no more money came to Boris from his estates. He tried vainly to find out what had happened to his brother and sisters, but at that time it was quite impossible to communicate with Russia. On the other hand, Leah knew quite well where her relatives were. By the time of the 1918 revolution, one sister was married and living in a comfortable flat in Paris, another in London. Of her 2 brothers, one was running a chain of shoe stores in Dallas, Texas, and the other managing tramways in Dublin. This not being an example of Hayklans Luck, but Rankoff common sense. As I am writing this, I see on the television that Boris Rankoff has been struck off the Oxford boat for 3 years running. He would not have been doing this if his grandpa had stayed home and helped with the revolution, as he was told to do formerly. As I have already said, Leah, being ever practical, then asked what they were going to live on. "We could start a riding school and grow cabbages," said Boris, ever helpful. "Nonsense," said Leah. "We must sell the house and live in a small one near London, and you can join my uncle, who will at least pay you." Boris was a little doubtful of his prowess as a furrier, but the uncle was delighted to have him, as he attracted customers like a magnet. So the family moved from their luxurious manor home and lived in a smaller house in Islington. After a while, the energy of Leah and the charm of Boris made the factory one of the most famous in the city, supplying Selfridges, C&A and many other firms with furs. It was Hayklans Luck that no way can fur be made into garments except by craftsmanship, machinery being out of the question. By the early 20s, the Hayklans family began to yearn for green fields and perhaps horses. "We will buy a house in the suburbs," said Leah. And to this end she answered an estate agent's advertisement for a large 6-bedroom house with mature gardens, open views, in perfect condition. It was my father's home in North Finchley. So this was my grandmother's father, Paul Bullet Cochrane. He was selling his house. A little quick note, when I read this I couldn't help but smile, because my youngest son has been both my sons are in the army, but my youngest son is in Chepstow on the Welsh border, and in fact is in charge of the stores. I thought it was very funny, and I took a picture of the page and I sent it to him so he could see that his great-grandfather had been more or less in exactly the same place doing exactly the same thing. And I think he would find it very interesting. So we're now at the point where two sides of my family collide, and I think collide is a good word for it.